As you can see here, I have all of the different pieces for one half of the jacket cut and marked. So we have here, we have the jacket center front panel, we have the jacket upper side front panel, we have two of the upper flap pocket, we have one of the pocket back, we have one of the lower side front panel, we have one of the flap facing for the lower side, and then we have the side back. Now, as you can see here, I have all of the stitching lines marked on everything because this particular detail requires accuracy. So having all of your stitching lines marked before you proceed is really key. So now that we have everything laid out and marked, we will begin construction. For our initial construction, what we will do is we will pin the dart, we will pin the two pieces of the upper flap together, and we will also pin the two pieces, the upper flap facing and the flap pocket bag together. So here we are, and there's a little trick for sewing the point, which I'll show you when I get there. But we first start by sewing along that stitching line. So when we get to about a ½ inch from the point, you want to shorten the stitches from your standard 2.5 to 0.75. It makes sewing this corner much easier and more secure for trimming. So then we get to the point, sew across a couple of stitches, and then afterwards you clear this back to 2.5. Okay, there we are. This is, have a look at this. This is the first one. So now what we want to do before we do any trimming, we want to go back to the work table. So I have sewn the dart, pressed the dart towards the center front. We can set this aside. And so then what we want to do is we want to put these two together. And I find it's easier to pin this way. So we're going to be matching these two ends here to the back. Let me just draw that in a little bit. So we match this one, and then we match this one. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to match it at the center. And then match it all the way down. Now, this way of inserting the pins is what's called pin basting. I like it better. I think it's more control. So now that we have this pinned, we can go back over to the machine. We're going to start here, sew to here, and then turn the corner Once there, we will then sew around. And then again, at the point, shorten your stitch from the 2.5 to the 0.5 to 0.75. And then go back to the 0 or the 2.5. And when we get to this corner here, we turn and sew. So what we've sewn here, we started here. We sewed to there, then up, down to here, and off here. Next, we do some trimming and clipping. Here we are at the work table. So to trim for the upper flap, what I like to do is first clip that off, and then this is a cheat, but it works. When you're trimming around curves, having the pinked rotary blade makes it so you don't have to cut little notches. Now when you're using this, you want the blade to be dead perpendicular to the work. Even then, you may get a few skips, especially if you're working on a curve, especially if you're working with thick fabric like this is. There we go. So the upper flap is trimmed, ready for pressing, and the lower flap, same thing. Clip that off, and here you want to clip into that stitching there, because if you remember, we sewed right to the edge here, and you want to do the same thing here. And you can trim these down a little bit if you need to. There we are. So again, hold that out of the way. There we go. Yay. So, give you a look here. So yes, so we've clipped there and there. We have both of these ready to go to the pressing table. So here we are at the pressing table. So our first order is to press as sewn. So first, here's one, and there we go. So So we're pressed as sewn. Next, we need to start turning. First, we'll press the upper flap after we turn it. So we turn it, use your point turner. Okay. Okay, so now after you have it turned, it's a good idea to kind of massage it in place. Give it a little bit of steam there. There we are. So now that it's held down, this is where you want to use your pressing cloth. I'm actually going to use the pressing cloth on this because someone is actually going to wear this. And then, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. There's a trick for pressing the corner. So what you're going to do with a needle and thread, you're going to just catch that corner. So then what you'll do is let it cool, and then take the thread out. So what you have is a really nice, sharp point. Now, one final thing I like to do, because this flap is going to fold up like so. So I like to fold the flap and pin through all the layers near the seam allowance or near the cut edge. This is going to build the turn of cloth in so that when you install it, it's going to want to roll like so. And what I will do is go over to the sewing machine and sew a machine baste. I will meet you at the sewing machine. So what I will do is I will machine baste at 1/2 inch, so this machine basting will hide later. This is a 5.0 stitch. There we are. So as you can see, that little bit hanging out, what that does, that builds the turn of cloth in so that when this flap is folded up into position, then this won't want to curl forward. So let's go back to the pressing table to press the lower half. So for the lower flap, we want to turn everything right side out. Again with the point turner. And since this side will be the back side, what I'm going to do here is kind of get everything in place, massage it in place, and we're going to steam and finger press it before we finally press it. So you notice there you have we have a finished edge and out. That's where you make that seam. That's why we made that angle. Here we'll do the same thing. And give it a good press. Then again, we catch this point with the needle and thread. And so here we are. It's good to do a little bit of a steam this way to give it some roll. And so now, as you can see, we are ready to go back to the work table. Here we have the two flaps. So then this sews to here. So this is how I figure out which is the right side. So this is the right side. So we match these two, because see what's going to happen. The seam allowance is going to press that way. That's how they work. I like to see it before I do it, because otherwise I'm dyslexic, I will mess it up. So let me put this aside. So really what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be matching up these points here. So the edge of this flap here is right there. And same with this one here. It matches up there. And then you line up the cut edges all together, because we're going to sew right on that stitching line. Okay, so everything here is pinned and ready to go. So what I will do off camera on the machine is I'm just going to sew with the 2.5 stitch all the way across here. Then all the seam allowances will press towards the body panel. I will bring everything back when I have done that. The next step is to put these two together. So what we'll do here is we're going to pin right there. And I'm going to flip this over and we'll pin right there. So we're lining up all of these. So we're pinning here and here. So next we'll go over to the machine. We want to sew a little bar tack on each one of these ends. That is what we're going to be doing next. I will meet you at the machine. At the machine, you can see here that I have changed the thread to a bright orange so you can see what I'm up to. And let me zoom in now. Because what you want to do, you just want to, about 1/8 of an inch or so in from the edge, 8 to 3/16. You just want to come in and you just want to sew close to that stitching, and then I'm just going to come down to the other end and again there we go. You want those two to be right on top of each other. If they shift a little bit when you move, just be really careful, make sure they shift back so that they're one on top of the other. And so then again, okay, so let me get this out of the machine and draw back and trim the threads. Then I can show you the result here. So you have a little bar tack there and a little bar tack there, because the object is that you want these two to fold out like so. Once we've done this, we can go back to the work table. Before you assemble, what you want to do is you want to remove the bulk at this point. You want these two seam allowances right at the seams to be fairly small, fairly narrow. So we have trimmed out the seam allowances. Next, we're going to be pinning the side panels. Now here we have the three pieces that we're going to be sewing together. First, what I want to do, I'm going to take this away, do them one at a time. We want to pin these two seams together. Now when you're pinning, you want to pin it so that the pocket is uppermost. Because when it's uppermost, we can then get in and sew at this point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this and I'll bring it back after I've pinned it. Okay, as you can see, I have one of the sides pinned. Now what I want to show you here is you want the pinning to be as close as you can get to the flaps. You can kind of feel the flaps, really, the ends of the flaps are right here. So the pinning on the other side, I'm going to pin the side panel to the body side front. So I will go off camera and match this all up, pin it, and I will bring it back. Okay, so we have the panels pinned together. Now it's time to go to the machine. As you can see, we have the zipper foot on, which is going to make sewing this quite easy, because the object here is when you get to these points, you want that stitch to be as close in as you can get. You don't want there to be a gap between the seam and the flaps. So, standard 2.5 stitch. Get that out of the way here. Okay, as we're coming towards this intersection, as you can see, we're getting right up next to that flap. Okay, we have one seam sewn. Now sewing the other seam, we're heading in the opposite direction, but that's okay. This is all good. So again, we're coming up on this juncture here, and again, you want that stitch to be as close to those flaps as you can get it. Okay, let me remove this from the machine and let's have a look. That is what this side is going to look like. We of course are going to press the seams open, and then over here have the same look over here. So yes, let's go back to the work table and have a look. So here we have everything before pressing. So what we want to do is trim these seam allowances down a little bit so that they don't cause a bulk inside, and do the same thing here. So our next step is to go over to the pressing table. Our first order of business press everything as sewn. And then it works better. I do like pressing on a seam roll. So this seam, the princess seam for the front, I like to press in stages. So press those open. And then here, the curve of the bust, I'm just going to clip these on an angle. There, better. So I'll press this, continue pressing down towards the pocket. And then here, that faces down. There's that. And then push both of the flaps up. Like so. The other side pretty much presses the same. So now we flip the flaps towards the hem to press the rest of the side seam. Okay, so now let me change camera angles so we can get a good look at what we've done. So here is what it looks like. And you can see that the upper one presses up, the lower one presses down. And so then what we need to do next is to put in the pocket bag and finish this pocket. I will meet you back at the work table. So here we are. There is the upper flap. This is the lower flap. So what we want to do now is add the pocket back. So what we want to do here is flip this flap down so that all the seam allowances face up. And I'm just going to pin that in place just to hold it. So then when you turn this over, what I want to do is to line up this cut edge with the cut edge of the seam allowance here, and I'm going to match this to here. So really what we're doing, we're going to be pinning through all layers, and we will sew through all layers. But you match the center and match the ends. Like so. So when we turn it over, what we're going to do, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and edge stitch about 1/8 of an inch in through all the layers. That is going to hold the pocket back to the body. So I will meet you back at the machine. So here we are at the machine. And as you can see, I changed to bright orange thread because I would like this to be a visible, I would like for you to see this. I would color match it to the fabric if I were doing this for something that was not a sample. And so here, let me just zoom in. And so you just edge stitch. We're edge stitching through all the layers. The seam allowances, the pocket bag, everything, all at once. Now, you could actually baste this. I pinned it, but if you want basting for it to be secure while you're sewing, then that's good as well. You don't have to sew all the way to these seams. You just want this to hold the pocket bag back. Now let me remove it from the machine and I will show you the results. So here you can see the edge stitching. Now that will hide when the pocket flap is put into position. So now that's what it looks like from the front. Now let me flip it over because I'm going to show you a little something here. Okay. If you get a little bit of variation here and here, don't sweat that. Don't rip that out. This is all inside the garment. You're never going to see that. So now our final step is going to be closing the pocket bag itself. So back to the work table. So here we are back at the work table. So to begin, you want both of the flaps to face up, and then we can fold this back. There we go. So the object here really is just to sew. Now you're not going to be able to get all the way up, but you want to sew the pocket bag all the way around. And so I'm pinning the front pieces to the back. Something you want to do just to remove bulk, you can actually trim the bulk out here just to remove that so it doesn't get caught into the seam. And you notice there's a little mismatch down here. Don't sweat that either. If you really, really are worried about it, when you get done, you can trim that off and no one will know. So we're pinned and ready to go back to the machine. So to close the rest of the pocket bag, you get as far up as you can. It's not all the way up, but that's not to worry. This is the bag. It doesn't have to be sewn all the way up. So this is just a standard 2.5 stitch. And again, you get up as far as you can, back tack. So let's have a look. So as you can see, we've sewn. Now I'm going to take this back over to the work table for finishing. As you can see, I used the rotary cutter to trim the seam allowances down. And so then here on these corners, doesn't hurt to just get rid of that and this. And if you have any seam allowance that kind of hangs over the pocket that might create a bind later, doesn't hurt to trim that down just a bit. So there's all the trimming. So now let's turn it over and see the results. So here is the pocket as constructed. As you can see here, the pocket back matches the fabric on the flaps, so you don't have a lining showing. At this stage, we build the jacket. As you can see, I have had the buttonholes worked, and so now we want to turn these back and stitch them to get the placement. I'm going to be sewing the buttons here. But what I've done here, this is just a pencil rolled up in tissue because you want to create a little bit of space. You don't want to sew this flat because it's just not terribly attractive. So what you can do here is you can fold this back, and then just so you can keep from pinning it through all layers, you just slip a ruler in, and there is that one. So I have secured the upper flap. So then the lower flap, bring this up a little bit. So here, turn that like so, and then here you can slip the ruler in so you don't pin it through the back of the pocket. So you make sure that you know these are placed properly. And you want to have sharp pins here, which I don't. So here you have a little bit of roll on each of these, as you can see, which is just a lot prettier when you wear it. So let me just zoom in a little bit to give you a better look. So there we have it. So I will go off camera and sew the buttons on and bring back the finished pockets. And here we have the final product. So let me zoom in here so you can get a good look. There we have it. The dual flat pockets. Voila.